What can we do as teachers to uplift the students in our classrooms? What happens when our students see themselves in their own story of learning and writing? What should concern us most about AI tools in education? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube most Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's Teacher on Fire is Marcus Luther. Marcus is a high school English teacher with over a decade in the classroom. He co-hosts a teacher-centered podcast and Substack called The Broken Copier, which focuses on conversations and strategies to better support teachers. You can connect with Marcus on LinkedIn, on X at MarcusLuther6, and on Instagram at The Broken Copier. Finally, on Substack at thebrokencopier.substack.com. Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the show today, my friend. Are you ready to light it up?
Yeah, I've been watching these for a long time and excited to be here and have this conversation with you. Thanks for having me on.
What a pleasure it is. We're going to talk about this more as we go along, but Marcus, you are one of the best, perhaps the best person out there in education, social media, in terms of sharing your practice with other teachers. And I'm truly honored to have you on with me this morning. So thanks for making the time on an early Saturday morning. We've got our mutual friend, Adrian, here in the audience. Good morning to you, Adrian. He says, I'm joining from Colorado. Looking forward to a great conversation. I hope we can deliver that for you, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting our work. Marcus, let's jump right into it with this Substack that you wrote recently. It was called Uplifting Moves in the Classroom, Why They Matter for Students and for You as a Teacher too. And I was smitten. I really enjoyed the piece and I want to unpack it here this morning. First of all, before we get into the 4 uplifting moves, let's back up for a moment and talk about something that you mentioned in your piece, the heaviness that sometimes settles in the classroom. I thought that was put so well. Most teachers can relate. What are you seeing and sensing so far this school year? And talk more about that heaviness that sometimes comes.
I appreciate you leading with that because I think it's really important that we name what we're feeling. And I know as someone who shares a lot of what's good in the classroom, it can kind of feel like that's the only thing happening. And I'm trying to also make sure I prioritize authentically, like, here's what I'm feeling. And like just examples of, hey, this thing's happening that in previous years, I would have had a little bit extra generosity, a little bit extra patience. And I'm just not feeling that. It's harder to hold that generosity. And I was noticing that, and I would share it with others. And a lot of people, it seems like it's resonating that it's just a little bit heavier this year. And I think there's a both and, right? Like there's like, yes, there are reasons for that heaviness, especially given that everything that's happening outside our classrooms, things that oftentimes we see harsh policies, cruel policies happening in our country and seeing it impacting our students and our communities and not knowing how to solve that. And then we walk in and like, okay, we're going to take some notes on, grammar conventions. And there's a disconnect. And I feel like we're carrying that. Our students are carrying that. But I also know that heaviness can beget heaviness. Like we can then let that heaviness influence our actions in the classroom. And we're humans. Like that's going to happen. And we need to give ourselves grace. But also like, what are the ways we can kind of counterbalance that and find ways to still prioritize what's good while at the same time very much naming what is bad and wrong going on. So that's kind of like where that post came from, was an acknowledgement, but also like a call to action to myself. And I just figured I might as well put it out there for others too.
Well, it was so encouraging, and we're going to start to unpack it here. But yes, thank you for unpacking that a little bit further. When we think about that heaviness, and I think even the best or the most experienced teachers can relate when sometimes you just don't have the stuff that you know that you have other days. You come into the room, maybe the vibe is not great, and you just think, this is what I've got planned for this learning activity is just going to be difficult. It's going to be a bit of a slog. So let's talk about combating that feeling. First uplifting move that you talked about was turning or pointing to a student and saying, everyone write down what so-and-so said. Talk about what that would look like.
Yeah, this just happened yesterday, so it's like very fresh an example of we were reading a poem as a class, and we are doing kind of our normal like annotations where they're highlighting stuff and sharing out. And I actually was like, there was this one line I can remember right now. It was line 16 of a poem by William Stafford, and I was hoping a student would, I was trying to guide the class to have one student say something about that line that I wanted them to say. And the student who I thought had it, like I could see the look in their eye, raises their hand. Student doesn't always raise their hand and says, well, actually, Ms. Luther, the most important line was line 17. And at first I'm like, okay, like I got to move on to get to like the line 16 point from someone else. But then they started explaining, and they had a thought that I had taught this poem multiple times already that week with different classes. And they said something that completely redefined the poem. And I like literally did a like like a little noise, because like you want even the kids who are zoning out to like catch that something just happened. I'm like, everyone pause, like everyone get your highlighters, everyone highlight exactly what that student just said. Can you repeat it? And I repeat it back. Then I explain why it's so meaningful. And I could literally say like, hey, I wish I had a time machine so we could go back to my other classes so we could share that. And for me, what that is it's a substantive uplift. Like it's not just saying great job. It's saying, I want to really confirm what I mean by saying great job, in the sense of I want you to see that I used what you said and validated it by having every other student in the classroom write it down. And that's a really powerful thing. And it doesn't have to be, oh, you got the highest score on something, right? Like these are like little in the moment things. It's fun. I could see the look in that student's face when it happened. And it's just like in the tool belt, like give yourself permission to, one, have a little fun, like have to make the funny noise, get the attention, but then find a way to really affirm not just the student for who they are, which is important, but also their ideas and thoughts. Because I feel like that's something that sticks. Like that student's going to remember what it was like to see all their classmates writing down what they said.
I think that visual effect of you being sort of overtaken by a student idea can be really, really powerful. And I mean, hopefully a lot of that is genuine, but we can also sort of embellish that in a really positive way too, and just make it clear that, wow, this was something that we had not considered before. And you've also got clearly a note-taking culture in your classroom when you can turn and say, write down what so-and-so said. Moving on to the second move, Marcus, you talked about kneeling down and giving quiet praise, but not too quiet. So when is this maybe the right move to just kneel down and quietly say a word of praise to a single student?
Well, the thing about this is that it's so accessible, and some students you don't want to give that stage performance, especially as you know over the year your students better, that quieter praise is more meaningful. And of course, you can write a note. There's a lot of things you can do, but sometimes as simple as, hey, is there a student who's doing well today that I just want to make sure that they know, they hear it from me, that they're doing well. And it can be that quiet kneel down praise as you're circling the classroom. And it can be maybe another one I did just yesterday was like, hey, 1 second before you leave, just pulling the student as they're filing out, just grabbing them by, and so everyone sees you kind of grab that student and just like, hey, just want you to know you've had a really good week. And I just really appreciate how you've shown up this week. Just quick, quiet, they go on their day. And, I was we're reading a book at our school by Daniel Coyle, I think The Culture Code. And he points out that belonging isn't built in a day. I think he writes like, we are built to require lots of signaling over time. And I think it's really important that we have all these different moves, these little things that we can do regularly so that students are consistently feeling like they are seen and affirmed in our classrooms. And that's why I really believe that it can't just be like one move. Like you've got to have different things for different students. And that kneeling down or that pulling that student aside, as simple as that is, I know a lot of teachers do that, but like knowing that move is there and being proactive about it. Like hey, instead of reacting to the good, looking to the good at the beginning of class, like who's a student who I can pull aside at the end of this class and celebrate? Because I really do think you see what you look for. And by changing your lens into your own classroom, especially when it's heavy, I really feel like that can be a powerful thing for you too. Like it feels good as a teacher, selfishly.
You see what you look for. I saw your post from I think you posted it yesterday about the good news phone calls that you were sort of preparing in advance. Like, okay, I'm going to call out someone from period 3, period 4, period 5. And you were prepared. You went into those blocks with that game plan to see those positive behaviors. And when that's our mindset, we're going to see it. Wow, that is powerful as well. Okay, self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Number 3, ask if you can take a picture and use it as an example. So where would this picture go? And would it go on a bulletin board? Would it go on some sort of online forum? Talk more about this one.
Yeah, like the best example I can give of this, and And I've written about like celebrating student writing. I talked about this a lot with Jennifer Gonzalez on the Cult of Pedagogy. But with the picture example, which is a little bit quicker and kind of in the moment, uh, students last year had graphic novel projects where they were just doing a graphic novel narrative page where they were designing something. So it wasn't just writing, like that was typed out that you could copy and paste. And there's two ways to do this. It could be that you could see the student working on it, or you go over there and just tell them like, hey, can I just take a picture of this so I can use it as an example for others or an example for future years? And then I could either post the examples digitally on our LMS, our course homepage on Canvas, or I have a physical laminated copy of examples that I can post on the wall, I can have for future years. And I would tell them that, and that gives them agency in that case. But similar to like the having every student write it down, I feel like this is a way to really substantively affirm, not just say great job, but like I'm going to show you by me using this as an example for others how much I value your work. Another way to do this, if you don't want to do it as publicly, like in the classroom, is sometimes I'll be reviewing work and I'll put like a little note, like saying, hey, can I use this as an example on when I pass it back? And sometimes I'll even just make like a little like symbol, and then I'll tell the whole class, hey, just so you know, like 5 of these really stood out. I put a little symbol that I would love to use them and take a picture for future years. If you've got one of those, feel free to give it back to me at the end of class so I can take that picture. If not, no big deal. So now the other students know that this happened too. So like there's these moves, and then there's the way you employ them. And as you use them over time, you find your own authentic way to use them in the classroom. So those are 2 examples of what that would look like.
I think sometimes we make moves like this, particularly taking the pictures and sharing artifacts with other classes, other students, but we forget the permission part. And I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes I just sort of assume, oh, the student will be delighted, I'm sure. Well, not always. And I think asking for permission actually gives them some ownership and agency in that process too. So that's an important step that I want to keep in mind. And then finally, that 4th move, Marcus, who can I brag to about how well you're doing? Is this the phone call home, or I guess it depends on how the student responds here, right?
Yeah, it depends on what it is. And a lot of times for me, it's a lot quicker. We have like a messaging app that will also like translate to whatever language the recipient needs at our school. Sometimes it's just like cool. A quick message, which I'm really appreciative to have that tool in our district. But, just the other day, it was just like yesterday, like a student who had a really good week, different student, different class. And it was like, hey, who's the best person? Like I really I see how well you're doing. I want to make sure I confirm that and like tell someone about it. Who would you like me to tell? And I'm thinking like parent, family member, grandparent. And they're like, they look at me directly. They're like, coach blank, like the head football coach. Like you get, so it's like quick message, head football coach, got the message, boom. And again, like now this is like a long-term win, right? Like I know for this kid, that's the person, right? So it's again, agency, but it also is for you, you get to learn something about the student, and you get to be able to just a little bit more creative. So you're not reaching out to the same folks all the time. So I appreciate that one. Sometimes I just send it out anyways to the parents or the family members, but sometimes it's just nice to ask. And I've got a lot of good results from that. And I think like also just like stepping back when I think about these different moves, and I think there's so many other moves, I just think about when I came into teaching that a lot of the tools that were provided were so oriented around student behavior and trying to like get students to like really the value was compliance and getting students to all do the same thing. And those are well intended. Like I've literally used those moves like proximity or 100%. And I've taught other teachers, and I don't think they're bad, but I also think if all your systems are underlaid by the value of compliance and uniformity, like we need to have a counterbalance. So like for me, like the reason I like calling these moves or calling them a system isn't because they're not authentic. It's because I think we need to make sure that we have systems and tools in our schools and classrooms that affirm individual students and uplift them for who they are and what they're doing. And I guess like you can kind of hear in my voice why I'm so passionate about that in this moment, because it feels like the waves are turning the other direction. Like we are prioritizing efficiency and compliance and uniformity. And this feels like my I don't know, like my like individual protest of like, no, this matters more. And I'm going to keep, drawing a line in the sand and saying like, I want to make sure that I'm doing things in the classroom that are affirming students individually.
I think a lot of teachers go into the classroom or the learning spaces in sort of a defensive mindset. Like I'm going to manage, we use that word, right? The classroom management. I'm going to manage the space, limit the off-task behavior, limit the noise, keep these students focused. And all of that, as you said, I mean, it has its place. It's all good, but it is defensive. What you're talking about is offense, right? It's going out and proactively, preemptively building morale and making those deposits that pay off down the road. Thank you so much for joining us, Teachers on Fire. Wherever you are listening, it might be on a podcast, might be audio only, Apple or Spotify, or perhaps you're joining us here on YouTube or LinkedIn. Please go ahead and like the video. That lets both of us know that something we've been sharing and talking about today has had some value and resonated for you. Adrian is back. He says these teacher moves affirm students in the classroom and amplifies a positive learning culture. So many wins. Yes, I would agree with that. And Mel, if you didn't see her message earlier, says, oh my goodness, I've not seen this live for so long. Joining from Malawi. I'm not sure about that first city there, Mel, but thank you for joining us from Africa. I want to say this morning, but it's probably not the morning for you. So thank you for joining us as well. Marcus, I couldn't let you go without touching on a couple of other topics. And again, educators listening, if you're not connected to Marcus Luther, one of the best, perhaps the best educator out there in terms of the value of the content he is sharing. He does not waste the posts, I'll tell you that. So the first one, Marcus, is something you were posting about recently, and you are, again, I'm gushing a little bit here, but I think it's appropriate. You are a master of empowering students to really reflect on their learning journeys in every stage of those journeys. But as you launched, I guess, a new course, the new year, you focused on helping students reflect on their journeys as writers. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that and what did it produce and where does that go from there?
Of course. This is a system that we've had for a few years now, and I've keep kind of tweaking and adjusting. And one of the adjustments is really starting with this overarching reflection of how would you describe yourself as a writer to begin the school year? And then we'll come back to that question at the end. So I feel like framing it around that. But the heart of the system is a pretty simple process that would apply to any content, which is before you give students their individual feedback on any assessment, whatever it is in your class, having them reflect on their process first. Like, how did they feel during it? What did they do to prepare? What were things that went well? How do, like, just having them capture that. And you have to do it before you give back the results, right? Because once you give the results, those results will define their reflection. And then you give the results back. We do a collective feedback lesson. So we talk about overall wins as a class and overall growth areas. They take notes, they anticipate what they think their feedback will be. And then by the time, like, I had one student be like, Mr. Luther, just give us our feedback already. Like, you had built this up over like a 40-minute period. I'm like, okay, now you got your individual feedback, you send it out. And now they do their individual reflection on the backside where they're saying, okay, in my own words, how I feel about how I did, what I need to do going forward. And for two reasons, like, I've really fallen in love with this system. Number one is, like, students' lives are, especially at the high school level, they're like, frankly, discombobulated. Like, they have 7 or 8 classes, they have extracurriculars, jobs. They're just like, we're in our classroom, we know what's going on, we know what the learning sequence is, but they're going all sorts of things, and that's totally fine. This is the glue. It's like, hey, this connects the learning. It's in one place. They link all their big things, big documents to that place, and we come back to it again and again and again. And it's something that's really powerful in terms of connecting the different learning priorities of your classroom, whatever that classroom is. And then secondarily, I think so often we look at just numbers and we assume that those numbers tell the story of how the student's doing. And I've had times where I was wrong, like a student who I saw making growth, like they get 75%, 80%, 90%. And then I read their self-reflection on this document. And it's like, I am never going to succeed. Like, I've had a student write that. I'm like, and I'm like, oh, they're doing great. But in their mind, they never hit that 100%, and they failed and they failed and they failed. And that led to a really important conversation. In one case, like a family conversation, like, hey, let's talk about like mindset and like how we feel about ourselves. And I feel like so much of our education system is predicated upon how adults feel about student learning. And for me, it's like, why not center how students feel about student learning? And that's what this system affords. It's really powerful. And it's been a really pleasure to see it. And I've had people from different parts of the country make it their own and share me samples. I had someone from Pennsylvania share me an example of what their learning stories looked like in their classroom this past year. So that's been a really cool thing, because I think it is something that could apply in a ton of different contexts. It doesn't just have to be English.
That's true. Absolutely. That metacognitive process is always powerful. And I can only imagine the pride of students when they revisit those early reflections and then they see their growth over the course of the year in your classroom. And I've read those reflections because you've shared them at the end of the years in the past as well. Marcus, finally, last topic. It's a big one, and I've been thinking a lot about this one over the course of this week because there's some conversation brewing in the financial world about an AI bubble. Not exactly where I want to go right now, but specifically when we think about AI in education, particularly K to 12 education. Thinking about AI tools, the presence of AI in education in our world, what can we do about it? And what is the real AI problem right now?
So yeah, setting the financials aside, I think
Yeah.
we read the same Derek Thompson blog post potentially, and I think just my mindset this year has been one just like prioritizing what's best for the learning in the classroom, and everything falls into that barometer. And I remain skeptical for me in my current context that the tools that I'm seeing are going to be better than what's already happening. And once I'm convinced, I'm open to that. So that's like where I'm at personally. But when I step back and I see what's happening in the conversation and I see the decisions being made that now district wide, statewide are not making it an option, but potentially mandating that you have to use this tool without agency as a teacher, I feel like this is a conversation that's being driven by, like all things education, people not in the classrooms. And I think it's well intended. Like if you are an adult outside the classroom and you're like, oh, I found this tool that helps me get my work done faster. It's an easy line from that to, oh, teachers should be teaching students how to do this, or we should be bringing this into schools. So I think just logically that's happening. And I get the natural thing. You're hearing other parts of our economy, other jobs saying we're using this. Students need to be prepared for this. I just think that a few things are happening that just really bother me. And it's really not with the students, it's with the adults. And the first is that this it seems like it should be easy to set a norm of just be transparent about what you're doing. And I think transparency leads to better conversations. It leads to understanding across perspectives. And I see a lot of people out there, I included a poll in like the post that I wrote, who don't believe that they need to be transparent. And for me, there's a little bit of a kind of telling on yourself, right? Like if you feel like this is okay to do, you should be okay saying, hey, I use this to write this letter of recommendation or write this email or create this project or give this feedback. And I'm not doing that, but I also feel like there's a right way to use AI and a wrong way. And part of the right way is transparency. And it just is like, frankly, shocking to me that as an educator who believes like I feel like this whole system is built on like academic integrity. Like we've punished students for not having integrity and transparency. Like I see a lot of adults out there who are not being transparent with their usage, especially with students. And I've talked to students about this. And sorry, pardon my language, they get pissed off when they find out like, oh, they used AI and didn't tell me. Like again, like you want to make the education system better. Students need to feel a sense of belonging, right? Like we care about a sense of belonging and trust. You can lose that a lot easier than you can build it up, right? We talked the whole first part of this conversation about all these individual small building blocks of trust. It doesn't take much to shatter that entire construction of trust that you've been building with students. And one way is to not be transparent. So I think like the first thing I'd share is the transparency thing. Just like on your end, like what have you been noticing? I'm curious. I know I have other parts, but like what's been like on your mind as you've been thinking about this?
I mean, thanks for asking. I operate in a K to 7 world, have been in the high school part of things in the past. And in my K to 7 world, I don't see AI tools coming out among students a whole lot. So I'm not wrestling with plagiarism, at least not on a wide scale. But the conversation is there for sure among teachers. Like, how can I use AI to make my practice more efficient? And if it supports teacher sustainability, I'm all for it. But I have had conversations precisely about one of the last things you mentioned there, which is if we are going to use Gen AI tools when it comes to something like report card comments, then we need to be transparent about that. So that would be sort of my open challenge, I think, Marcus, to teachers is if you're using it in something that is going out to the community, then disclose. Otherwise, we're not being very good models, are we?
Yeah. And I think you also said like the buzzword of the day, right? The word efficiency. And I think that was also included in my post is I am all about like efficiency as one of a value that we should work for in terms of, labor, et cetera, in terms of saving time. But like we need to nuance it and have, and for me, like the keyword is discernment. And I talked about this. And let's say just hypothetically, you are someone and you've got to, as a teacher, send out 10 emails or 10 communications, and you could use AI to do that and save yourself 30 minutes, what have you, and just edit them and send them out. And you're like, okay, the net win, efficient, good. I save 30 minutes. I can use that to do this other task. And I guess that's how the math works, right? When I read all these AI posts. Uh, I would add, like, there's a potential loss, right? In terms of credibility, right? If you're because when I get an email, I like to think of the person, or I get a letter, or I get any communication, I think of the person taking their time to communicate with me, right? And the signal, if you're using AI, is I didn't want to take as much time to make this communication with you. And even if you don't want that to be the signal, you don't get to control how the other person responds. And that doesn't mean that it's not the right tool for right situations. I'm open to that. But I feel like we need to be having conversations about that net gain versus potential loss and more discernment, including with students, right? Like I'm open to bringing these conversations into the classroom around. And I feel like we just have to have a better conversation around AI and have time and resources to have that conversation. The example would be like when we went to teaching online after like the peak of the pandemic and we were teaching online. One of the things I was so appreciative of our school district is they gave us Mondays. You would meet students for like about an hour online, but then the rest of Monday was additional time, knowing that this was a massive shift as a practitioner to conduct your courses online and plan an LMS system. And it was like we were going through a paradigm shift and we needed more time and space to learn and develop as educators and professionals. And we got that time. And it was a really powerful experience. I got a lot of skills out of it. And there was a lot of actually good in those classrooms, despite all the obviously not good. We're going through another paradigm shift and no one's giving us the time. No one's giving us the resources to actually think about what this means for our classrooms and students, for students to participate in that conversation. And I guess like that's my other thing is like we need to slow down and do this the right way, which means bringing different perspectives to the table and having conversations and uplifting the people who are leading from the classroom. Like there's so many teachers out there who are doing this the right way. Like Brett Vogelsinger is like giving such great examples from his classroom. And I'm seeing different professors online sharing what's working and what's not working with humility and transparency. And I guess like I wish there was like a button to say like, can I amplify those people and like silence a lot of the others they're just trying to proliferate this thing without the nuance and credibility of the classroom. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I've just been a little bit disappointed about the direction this is heading. But at the same time, I'm trying to make sure I stay focused on the people who are doing it the right way and reading and learning from them.
Wow, well said, Marcus. I don't have a lot to add to that because you covered a lot of the important bases and you've written a lot more as well. So if you're interested, listener, in digging into more of Marcus's thoughts on AI, he's got a dedicated tab on his Substack. And this question actually came from a recent post titled "Adults Are the AI Problem in Education." Love that title, and I got a huge response, continues to, on Substack as well. So congratulations on that. On that note, Marcus, for those interested in this conversation and some of the ideas you've shared today about uplifting moves in the classroom, how can we connect with you?
Just in general, any of the links work. You can always reach out to the Substack. You can definitely find me on Twitter. Blue Sky is probably where I'm spending a little bit more of my time these days. And any of those places, I would love to reach out. And I think one of my takeaways from the last few years entering this space and learning so much from other folks is it's so cool to have this network of educators and teachers to learn from and to go back and forth with. And I got like, texting with Adrian Neibauer about like, hey, what's working, what's not. And I love the people I work with at my school. I've got a great team and I learned so much, but it's such a value add to have this network of people outside from different contexts and experiences. And I like to participate in that both directions. So if you've got things that you like and are working for you, feel free to send them our way. And we'd love to maybe learn about that or maybe amplify them. But also, if you ever have questions, I'm a big believer that we're doing this together. This teaching thing is a community thing. And if there's something that we have that's helpful, that I have that's helpful, no problem sending it your way. So yeah, just reach out.
Well, thank you so much for that open posture that you continue to take. I don't know how you do it all so well, but you do. And it must be a very disciplined life. That's another conversation we'll get into next time here on the podcast. But thank you, Marcus, for everything you shared today and continue to share online. I'll have to make that note that you are on Blue Sky more than some of the other platforms these days. That's interesting. This has been everything I wanted it to be, this conversation today. So thank you again for sharing some of your weekend with the podcast. Teachers on Fire. I'm your host, Tim Cavey. So grateful that you too decided to spend some of your day listening to this episode. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Marcus Luther sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
You can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.